So when I put tariffs on Canada, they're paying 25%, but that could go up in terms of cars.
President Trump announced 25% tariffs against our auto industry. And this is a direct attack. We will defend our workers. We will defend our companies. We will defend our country.
It's 2025. Donald Trump is back in the White House, and Canada, America's longstanding partner and northern neighbor, is not just frustrated, it's furious. For decades, the two countries have worked together on everything from NORAD to NATO, from trade to tech. But now, that bond is cracking, and not quietly. Behind the scenes, Ottawa is preparing to walk away from not one but 5 major military deals with the U.S. From fighter jets to missile systems, Canada is hitting pause and possibly hitting delete on defense contracts worth billions. Why? Because Trump's tariff war is not just targeting Chinese steel or Mexican avocados anymore. It's hammering Canadian industries too. Prime Minister Mark Carney is making one thing clear. Canada won't be treated like a junior partner anymore. And what started as a fight over cars and ketchup could now reshape the entire military balance in North America. Let's start with the first and most controversial contract of all, tariffs, the flashpoint that sparked a shift. The trade rupture between Canada and the US didn't start with a bang, but with a tariff. In a controversial move, President Trump reimposed a 10% duty on Canadian aluminum, accusing Canada of flooding the US market. Ottawa's response was swift and pointed. A $3.6 billion Canadian dollar counter-tariff aimed at everything from soda cans and bicycles to golf clubs and washing machines. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland minced no words. She called the U.S. action absurd and ludicrous, warning it would hurt Americans just as much. At a time of fragile recovery, this trade war is the last thing we need, she said. In fact, Freeland noted that the Whirlpool washing machines made in Ohio, where Trump made his announcement, would now become more expensive and less competitive globally. This wasn't just an economic tit for tat. Canada suspended procurement contracts involving U.S. steel and began a full-scale review of its trade and security dependencies. With 75% of Canadian exports going south of the border, the risks of overdependence became glaringly obvious. Prime Minister Mark Carney repeated this new reality, stating, "Our reliance on one market has become a liability. The fallout from these tariffs catalyzed a bold pivot. Canada began courting non-US partners more aggressively. Since 2023, trade with Europe and Asia has grown by over 18%, reflecting a clear diversification push. The aluminum tariffs were not just about metal, they shattered trust. And in doing so, they accelerated Canada's shift toward a broader, more balanced global trade strategy. Cars, Canada's alternatives, and EV bet. The car you drive might not feel like a weapon, but in this economic fight, it is. It all started with Trump's 25% tariff on Canadian-made vehicles and auto parts, justified under national security grounds. That decision sent shockwaves through Canada's tightly integrated automotive industry. Suddenly, decades of cross-border manufacturing were at risk. Ottawa's response hit back hard. Tariffs on U.S. vehicles. A strategic push to scale back dependency. And something symbolic. Project Aero, Canada's first domestically designed and built electric concept vehicle. Disclosed at CES 2025, the Aero is not just a car, it's a statement. Built with over 97% Canadian components and developed by more than 50 local suppliers, it signals that Canada does not need Washington's blessing to innovate. Industry voices are rallying too. François-Philippe Champagne, Canada's innovation minister, said, "Project Aero represents the future of Canadian manufacturing, clean, connected, and independent. Foreign automakers are watching. Germany, South Korea, and even Australia have expressed interest in co-developing EV projects with Canada. And with tariffs making U.S. trade increasingly explosive, diversifying is no longer a luxury, it's a need. But as Canada decouples piece by piece, the big question remains: how far will this go? And how will Washington respond?" Fighter jet alternatives, sovereignty in the skies. It started with tariffs. Then came the automotive sector. Now, Canada's push for autonomy is reaching even higher into the skies. The F-35 Lightning II was once heralded as the crown jewel of Canada's air defense modernization. Ottawa committed over $7 billion for the first 16 jets in 2025, after having already contributed nearly $100 million to the program's development. Yet, despite its stealth and cutting-edge design, the F-35 now represents a dilemma. Who controls it? Beneath its aerodynamic exterior lies a software backbone that Canada cannot fully access. Critics argue this creates a dangerous dependency where every upgrade, patch, or operational tweak requires U.S. approval. Citing these digital sovereignty concerns, Ottawa has quietly paused further purchases, leaving the remaining 72 jets in limbo. Defense Minister Bill Blair was candid. "We're examining alternatives that give us operational autonomy. Sovereignty matters in 21st century warfare. Among those alternatives is the GCAP, the Global Combat Air Program led by the UK, Japan, and Italy. What makes GCAP attractive isn't just its technological promise, but its co-development model. Greater transparency, full tech transfer, and shared control. That's something the F-35 program hasn't offered. The U.S. Department of Defense has cautioned that abandoning the F-35 could jeopardize NATO and NORAD interoperability. However, for Canada, this debate is no longer just about military alignment. It's about who holds the keys. Other options like Sweden's Saab Gripen, which offers local manufacturing and 6,000 Canadian jobs, are also on the table, as is the Eurofighter Typhoon and France's Rafale. Ultimately, this isn't just a procurement decision, it's a sovereignty statement. In a world increasingly defined by digital warfare and geopolitical unpredictability, Canada is making one thing clear. It wants to fly on its own terms. Canada's missile alternatives, beyond HIMARS. If fighter jets are Canada's wings, missiles are its claws. And right now, Ottawa is reviewing who supplies them. At the center of the debate is a $5 billion deal with the U.S. for M142 HIMARS, rocket launchers, fire control software, and guided ammunition. These systems are powerful, but they come with strings controlled from Washington. Canadian defense officials have confessed that given current tensions, even this high-priority purchase might be put on hold. The problem is not just the price tag, it's about control, long-term independence, and the risk of relying too heavily on a partner that keeps turning up the heat. Critics say the deal shows how slow Canada has been to diversify its defense portfolio. One industry insider put it bluntly, "Buying more U.S. weapons just fuels public frustration. Canadians don't want to feel like a branch plant of the Pentagon." And there are options. Ottawa is actively exploring the PULS system, a multi-rocket launcher developed by Israel's Elbit Systems and co-produced with Germany. The system is already in use in Europe, including Denmark and Spain, with some units assembled locally. That flexibility is exactly what Canada is after. Powerful tech, built with allies, and without one-sided dependency. Another option is South Korea's K239 Chunmoo. Fast, mobile, and tested in the field, it matches or outguns HIMARS in many areas, and it delivers faster. Poland went from 22 units to nearly 300 after being impressed by its performance. Estonia is now eyeing the Chunmoo after growing intolerant of U.S. delivery delays. Canada may follow that path. This shift isn't just military, it's political. Trudeau's administration may be long gone, but Carney's team is continuing the quiet revolution of loosening the American grip. Defense decisions once rubber-stamped in Washington are now being filtered through a new lens: Canadian autonomy. And nowhere is that more urgent than in the icy skies above the Arctic. NORAD strain, continental defense, and Arctic race. Since 1958, NORAD has been the cornerstone of North American defense. But rising geopolitical tensions are testing that alliance. Canadian officials are now weighing a recalibration. potentially reducing their NORAD footprint to pursue independent Arctic surveillance. Inside DND, sources hint at bold ambitions, a standalone early warning system, and participation in Australia's GNE&x radar network. Over $6 billion has already been allocated for advanced over-the-horizon radar tech, capable of scanning far beyond Canadian skies. This shift worries Washington. "We rely on full Canadian participation," warned NORAD Commander General Gregory Guillot. Any scaleback, he says, could leave the Arctic partially blind. Why does this matter? Because the Arctic isn't just melting, it's becoming a geopolitical flashpoint. Russia and China are expanding operations. Meanwhile, Canada is asserting its sovereignty by constructing a deep-sea port in Tuktoyaktuk, carving out ice-capable highways, and pushing claims that overlap with Russian and Danish territories through the UNCLOS process. As the Northwest Passage inches toward becoming a new global trade route, Prime Minister Carney declares, "The Arctic is not a frontier, it's Canada's homeland. We will defend it accordingly." Canada's message is clear. Arctic leadership belongs to those who live there, not opportunistic latecomers. Canada-US reaction and possible repercussions. Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is charting a bold course, balancing economic pragmatism with strategic autonomy. Once head of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, Carney isn't pulling punches. He's launched a comprehensive audit of all US-centric dependencies, from trade and procurement to defense technology. This isn't a break with America. Carney declared in January 2025, "It's a break with dependency." This recalibration hasn't gone unnoticed. Behind closed doors in Washington, US defense officials are raising red flags. Canada's pivot could fracture shared supply chains, intelligence flows, and joint military initiatives. Still, American business leaders, particularly in the auto and energy sectors, are pressuring the White House to de-escalate before economic ties are irreparably strained. In a diplomatic gesture, a bipartisan US delegation traveled to Ottawa in March 2025, hoping to soothe tensions. But while the optics were friendly, tariffs remain intact. Canada, once quietly tethered to the US, is now asserting its independence. What began as an economic dispute may evolve into a long-term strategic realignment between two of the world's closest allies. Canada's reassessment of these 5 major defense contracts is more than just a policy shift. It's a reset. Canada is no longer willing to be the junior partner in a relationship built on economic threats. Prime Minister Carney put it best. This isn't a break with America. It's a break with dependency. Whether it's F-35s, HIMARS, or Project Arrow, every decision now points in the same direction: diversification. Canada is choosing stability over routine and sovereignty over convenience. And if this trajectory continues, the North American alliance as we have known it for decades may never look the same again.